What if I told you that across Asia, in places shaped by Buddhism, secularism, communism, Islam, and modern consumer culture, Catholicism is quietly gaining new ground? What if I told you that in cities where churches once seemed invisible, catechumen classes are filling up, that in countries where Christians are a tiny minority, young adults are still stepping forward for baptism, and that in one small Asian nation, the surge is so striking that it may become one of the most surprising Catholic stories of 2026. This is not just about old Catholic strongholds. This is about new hunger, a hunger for truth, a hunger for beauty, a hunger for meaning in a continent moving faster than ever. Now, before we begin, let me make one thing clear. When I say rapid Catholic conversions, I am not talking only about total Catholic population. I am looking at something more revealing. Adult baptisms, catechumen momentum, Easter vigil numbers, youth engagement, missionary energy, and the unmistakable signs that the church is becoming newly visible in places where many assumed it would stay small. And what's remarkable is this: the story is not the same everywhere. In some nations, conversions are happening quietly, one family at a time. In others, they're happening through schools, cities, and campus ministries. And in a few places, they're happening under real pressure, which only makes the witness more powerful. So today, we're counting down the top 10 Asian nations where Catholic conversions are rising fastest heading into 2026. Stay with me all the way to number 1, because the country at the top of this list is not the one most people would guess. Let's begin. Number 10, Japan, may be one of the last countries many people would expect on this list. It is orderly, highly developed, and deeply shaped by a culture that often keeps religion private. Christianity remains a small minority there, and Catholicism can seem almost hidden beside the scale of Japanese secular life. And yet, that is exactly what makes the signs coming out of Japan so interesting. Because when Catholicism grows in a place like Japan, it does not usually grow through noise. It grows through witness, quiet witness, patient witness, relational witness. In Tokyo alone, more than 100 people were expected to enter the church at Easter in 2026. That may not sound massive compared with huge Catholic countries, but in Japan, those numbers matter. Every adult baptism represents a real decision made against the grain of the surrounding culture. This is not inherited Catholicism. This is chosen Catholicism, and that makes it powerful. Part of the story runs through Catholic schools. In Japan, Catholic education often becomes the first doorway through which students encounter the faith seriously. For some, it begins with discipline, beauty, service, or the atmosphere of prayer. For others, it begins with questions, the kind modern life cannot answer as easily as people pretend. What is a meaningful life? What is sacrifice? What is mercy? What is truth? Those questions do not disappear in a high-tech society. If anything, they become sharper. That is why Catholicism in Japan often grows through presence rather than pressure. It is not loud. It is not flashy. But it is attracting people who are weary of shallow living and curious about something older, deeper, and more demanding. Japan is number 10 because the conversions there are not dramatic in sheer scale, but they're deeply significant in context. And sometimes the most meaningful growth begins in silence. Number 9, Mongolia. Now let's move to one of the smallest Catholic communities in all of Asia, and one of the most remarkable. Mongolia. If you only looked at raw numbers, you might miss the story completely. The Catholic Church in Mongolia is tiny, very tiny, but that is exactly why every new convert there feels like a flare in the night sky. This is a church that grew from almost nothing after the fall of communism. Just a couple of decades ago, there were fewer than 200 Catholics in the country. Now the number has climbed to around 1,400, and while that may still sound small, the rate of growth relative to its base is extraordinary. But numbers alone do not explain Mongolia. What makes this story powerful is the kind of conversion happening there. These are often deeply personal journeys. People encounter the church not as a cultural default, but as something radically new. In a country where Catholicism has no historical majority status to lean on, faith has to be proposed person to person, relationship to relationship, heart to heart. And that changes the quality of the witness. In Mongolia, the church cannot coast. It cannot assume. It cannot hide behind cultural habits. It has to love. It has to serve. It has to endure. That is why the church there often leaves such a strong impression on people who discover it. The community is small enough to feel personal, fragile enough to feel precious, and sincere enough to make modern cynicism look tired. Even Pope Francis' visit helped shine a wider light on what many had overlooked. That in the spiritual margins of Asia, Catholicism is not dead weight from the past. It is new life. Mongolia is number 9 because it proves a crucial truth. Rapid conversion is not always about gigantic crowds. Sometimes it is about a tiny church growing with unusual intensity. And in Mongolia, that intensity is real. Number 8, Laos. Laos is another country where the Catholic story is easy to underestimate. The church there is small, often isolated, and forced to move with humility and patience. It does not dominate headlines. It does not have the public strength of Catholic communities in larger nations. But precisely because of that, the signs of growth become more striking. Recent reporting has described the Catholic Church in Laos as a community that still gives hope for the future. That phrase matters. Hope for the future does not come from stagnation. It comes from life. It comes from movement. It comes from a stubborn fact that, even under pressure, the faith is still being carried forward, little by little. That may be the best way to understand Laos. Not explosion, not spectacle, but little by little. A child learns to pray. A family stays faithful. A village keeps a chapel alive. A new believer says yes. A local priest continues the work. A hidden church refuses to disappear. And when all those little moments are added together over time, a quiet momentum begins to build. That quiet momentum is what puts Laos on this list. Because in a heavily controlled environment, even modest growth can be spiritually enormous. A Catholic community of around 50,000 may still look tiny beside the wider nation, but when that community keeps producing fidelity, vocations, and patient witness, something alive is happening. Laos reminds us that the future of Catholic conversion in Asia will not only be written in giant cities and major media centers. It will also be written in smaller places, places where the church survives through local courage, hidden prayer, and a faith that is too rooted to be erased. And that is exactly why Laos belongs in this countdown. Number 7, Cambodia. Now we come to a country where the recent signs are impossible to ignore. Cambodia. The Catholic community there is still small, but in Easter 2025, the country welcomed 375 newly baptized Catholics. And what made the story even more striking was that many of them were young people and adults. Think about that. Not just infants, not just inherited religion. Young people, adults, people making a conscious choice. That is one of the clearest signs of authentic conversion momentum. And in Cambodia, that momentum carries unusual weight because of the country's painful history. This is a land that knows suffering, fragility, and loss. For a small Catholic minority to welcome that many new faithful is not just a statistic. It is a sign of hope, a sign that the gospel is still attracting, a sign that Jesus is still being sought, a sign that Catholicism is being discovered not as a foreign ornament, but as a living answer. What makes Cambodia especially compelling is the youth dimension. Reports from the ground have made clear that many younger Cambodians are being drawn to Christ. That matters because youth conversion is not just about present numbers. It is about future shape. A church that is attracting the young is not fading. It is planting. And there is something beautiful about the way Catholicism grows in Cambodia. It often grows through closeness, schools, pastoral centers, charity, and personal contact. It grows where people feel seen. It grows where wounds are treated seriously. It grows where faith is not sold as ideology, but lived as mercy. The kind of growth may not always be loud enough for international headlines, but it is real. Cambodia is number 7 because its conversion story is one of the clearest examples of a small church becoming visibly more fruitful in a very short time. And when a small church starts baptizing hundreds of mostly unbelievers, wise people pay attention. Quick pause here, because if you think this list is already surprising, wait until we hit the top 5. The next few countries show something even more dramatic. Not just isolated conversions, but sustained, organized, visible Catholic momentum. Number 6, India. India may surprise some people on this list for a different reason. It is not surprising because Catholicism is unknown there. Catholic Christianity has deep roots in India. But it is surprising because the faith continues to attract people even in a climate where conversion is politically sensitive, controversial, and in some states fiercely opposed. That tells you something. If adult baptism were not happening, anti-conversion laws would not feel so urgent to those pushing them. If evangelization were irrelevant, it would not provoke so much anxiety. The very resistance tells you the question of religious change is alive, and very alive. India's Catholic story is complex because it is not one story. It is many stories at once. Ancient communities in the south, tribal regions where Christianity has spread through education and service. Urban seekers who encounter the church through schools, hospitals, social work, or friendships. Young people drawn by the clarity and sacramental depth that Catholicism offers in an age of confusion. That diversity is what makes India so important. Because when Catholic conversion happens in India, it often happens at the intersection of culture, caste, aspiration, suffering, and truth. It is rarely superficial. It is often costly. And costly faith is serious faith. India is number 6 not because the data is simple. It isn't. But because the country remains one of the most consequential conversion frontiers in all of Asia. There is pressure. There is scrutiny. There is hostility in some regions. And yet, the Catholic witness continues. Schools continue. Charity continues. Prayer continues. Baptism continues. That is not decline. That is resilience under heat. And resilience under heat is often one of the surest signs that spiritual growth is real. Number 5, Indonesia. Indonesia is one of the most fascinating Catholic stories in Asia right now. This is the world's largest Muslim-majority nation. And yet Catholic life in parts of Indonesia is showing unmistakable signs of renewed energy. In 2026, one Jakarta parish alone marked 60 catechumens taking a serious step toward baptism, and the Archdiocese of Jakarta also launched a large Eucharistic revival that drew thousands. That combination matters, because conversions do not happen in a vacuum. They tend to happen where the church itself is spiritually awake, where the Eucharist is central, where preaching is clear, where community is strong, where people sense not just tradition, but conviction. And Indonesia is showing those signs. Of course, Catholicism in Indonesia is not new. There are regions with strong Catholic roots. But what makes the present moment noteworthy is the renewed visibility of catechumens, revival efforts, youth participation, and confident public witness in a country where Catholics remain a minority. That witness has weight. People notice when a minority community is joyful. People notice when worship feels alive. People notice when a church serves without bitterness and believes without apology. And in a nation as vast and culturally diverse as Indonesia, even localized surges can signal something much larger beginning to move beneath the surface. Indonesia is number 5 because the conversion story there is no longer only about old Catholic enclaves. It is also about new seekers, urban momentum, and a church that seems increasingly ready to invite, form, and receive. In a place where many expected Catholicism to remain contained, is showing fresh confidence. And that confidence attracts. Number 4, Malaysia. Malaysia enters this countdown with one of the clearest public numbers in all of Asia. More than 2,000 young people and adults were expected to receive baptism at the Easter Vigil in 2025. Let that sink in. More than 2,000 in a Muslim-majority nation. in a country where Catholicism is a minority, in a society where religious identity is not a light or casual matter. That is not a symbolic trickle. That is a serious wave. What makes Malaysia's story especially strong is that it is not only about one city or one isolated parish. The signal came from across the country, showing that Catholic momentum is appearing in multiple communities. That suggests structure, formation, follow through. It suggests a church that is not merely attracting curiosity, but successfully bringing people all the way to baptism. And that is a different level of growth. Malaysia's Catholic story is also deeply multicultural. It sits at the meeting point of languages, ethnic communities, urban ambition, and varied local histories. That kind of diversity can weaken some institutions. But when the church handles it well, it becomes a strength. The faith begins to look truly universal, not bound to one tribe, one class, or one social mood. That universality is one of Catholicism's greatest advantages in Asia. In Malaysia, people can see that the church is not just for one ethnic group, one economic bracket, or one generation. It is becoming a place where multiple worlds meet before the same altar. Malaysia is number 4 because the public conversion signal there is too strong to ignore. Thousands preparing for baptism is not background noise. It is a headline, and one that suggests the church is becoming more visible, more confident, and more compelling than many outsiders realize. Number 3, Vietnam. Vietnam is one of those countries where the Catholic story feels both ancient and young at the same time. Ancient, because the faith has survived persecution, regulation, and generations of difficulty. Young, because the church there is still bursting with youthful energy, missionary desire, and vocational strength. And that combination is rare. What makes Vietnam so important in 2026 is not just conversion in the narrow numerical sense. It is the broader ecosystem that makes conversion believable and sustainable. A church with strong families. A church with young people willing to serve. A church with growing vocational life. A church that still expects sacrifice. Recent reporting has highlighted Vietnam's vocation growth and strong missionary focus. Youth gatherings have brought together thousands. Church leaders are speaking openly about forming missionary disciples and missionary communities. That language matters because it reveals the inner temperature of the church. Cold churches do not talk like that. Dying churches do not produce that kind of energy. Passive churches do not gather thousands of young people with conviction. Vietnam does. And when a church has that much youth, structure, family memory, and missionary purpose, conversion becomes more likely. Why? Because seekers are not entering an exhausted institution. They're entering a living body. That changes everything. Vietnam is number 3 because it represents one of the strongest long-range Catholic growth environments in Asia. Even when public baptism numbers are not always packaged for headlines, the foundations are obvious. Youth, vocations, mission, sacrifice, and continuity. That is the kind of church that keeps attracting new believers, not only this year but for years to come. Number 2, South Korea. Now we come to a country that has become one of the great Catholic success stories of modern Asia. South Korea. And the numbers here are hard to ignore. Catholic baptisms in South Korea rose sharply in 2023 and then rose again in 2024 to more than 58,000. Even more striking, adult baptisms made up a major share of that growth. That is huge, because adult baptism tells you something different from cultural maintenance. It tells you the church is not just holding inherited ground. It is gaining new ground. South Korea's Catholic strength comes from a rare combination: intellectual seriousness, strong lay formation, visible public witness, martyr memory, urban modernity, and a faith that still looks credible to many young people. That last part is critical. In many advanced societies, religion fades as prosperity rises. But South Korea complicates that story. Here, Catholicism has shown a way to look educated without becoming hollow, modern without becoming rootless, and active without becoming superficial. That balance is powerful. The church in South Korea also understands media, education, pilgrimages, and community life. It has enough institutional strength to form people seriously and enough spiritual identity to keep attracting those who want more than career success and digital distraction. And in a society that moves fast, Catholicism can offer something many people are starving for: coherence. A moral center, a sacramental life, a community bigger than the self, a faith that asks something. South Korea is number two because it combines visible numbers with deep structure. This is not just a burst of emotion. It is organized momentum, and that is why the church there continues to command attention far beyond its borders. And now, number one, if you made it this far, you probably expect a giant country, maybe a persecuted one, maybe a nation already famous for Catholic resilience. But the number one Asian nation with the most surprising Catholic conversion momentum heading into 2026 is Singapore. Yes, Singapore, a tiny city-state, hypermodern, efficient, financially driven, highly educated, often described more in terms of economy, technology, and urban excellence than spiritual awakening. And yet this year, Singapore prepared to welcome about 1,250 new Catholics at Easter, the largest cohort in roughly a decade. That is extraordinary. Not because Singapore is large. It isn't. But because when a place that's small posts that kind of visible conversion momentum, something serious is happening. And what makes it even more impressive is the context. Singapore is not growing through cultural Catholic inertia. It is growing in one of the most modernized environments in Asia. This is a society built on speed, discipline, achievement, and pressure, which means many of the people entering the church are not doing so because life is easy and conventional. They're doing it because something in Catholicism is answering a need that success alone cannot satisfy. That is the surprise. In a city known for performance, people are seeking transcendence. In a place known for structure, people are seeking grace. In a society known for external order, people are seeking interior meaning. And the church is receiving them. Singapore's story also reveals something important about Catholic conversions in Asia today. They are not only happening on the margins. They are happening in global cities, among educated adults, in a culture of ambition, in places where people have access to comfort, information, and upward mobility, and still decide that none of it is enough. That makes the witness even more compelling. Singapore is number one because it captures the future-facing side of Catholic growth in Asia: urban, disciplined, diverse, intentional, and deeply surprising. Not a relic, not a leftover, but a modern conversion story unfolding in real time. So what do these 10 nations have in common? They're different in language, different in history, different in political systems, different in religious background. But they share one thing: people are still searching for truth that does not bend every 5 minutes, searching for beauty that is not fake, searching for a faith that can survive suffering, discipline desire, and give meaning to modern life. And that is why Catholicism is finding new openings across Asia. In Japan, it whispers. In Mongolia, it glows. In Laos, it endures. In Cambodia, it reaches the young. In India, it persists under pressure. In Indonesia, it regains confidence. In Malaysia, it gathers thousands. In Vietnam, it multiplies through youth and mission. In South Korea, it expands with structure and strength. And in Singapore, it shocks the continent by rising in one of the most modern places of all. Asia is not becoming Catholic overnight, but something is happening. Something real, something measurable, something spiritual. And if these signs continue, the Catholic future in Asia may be far brighter and far faster moving than most people imagined. If this documentary opened your eyes, don't stop here. Like the video, subscribe for more Catholic deep dives, and share this with someone who still thinks the church is only growing in the places everyone already knows. And if you made it all the way to the end, comment below. Asia is awakening, because the story of Catholic conversion in Asia is not over. In many places, it may just be beginning,